Hey guys, it's Coach Ro from RocioFlores.com. I'm doing my daily life Bible reading. Today we're going to read the book of Exodus chapter 22, the laws about theft, the laws about seduction and respect for God, and capital offenses. Also laws about personal property. Lots of laws. Lots and lots of laws. If you are not caught up with any of my reading, just make sure you go to bit.ly/Rose Daily Life Bible Reading, and I've got the book of Genesis, the book of Job, and the entire beginning of the book of Exodus so far. And I finally uploaded all of the videos from last week. So I hadn't uploaded it, but I hadn't added all the information or the links to them. So then I just left them on private on my YouTube. And so today I went and I added all the links. So remember I told you guys that I would add links about, a dictionary about all the different Bible words and all the different kinds of, so that you know where to look. And the link I put has different types of dictionaries, so you can like click depending on what you're trying to find out, I guess. And then I specifically put definitions or terms that we talked about, which was purification, consecration, cleanliness, purification, stuff like that. Also, what else was this? The presence of God and what that kind of means. So versus like what it meant back then and what it means now and what it could mean. And then I also put the picture of the fire pillar and the cloud that like led them when they were walking. And then I also did the Bible Project. I remember the name, Project. The Bible Project video that talked about so remember in the beginning, they have a whole video of 1 through 18 on the book of Exodus. And then they got 19 to 40 for the rest of the book of Exodus. So just make sure that you go check that out if you want to read more of a summary versus going into details. And yeah, so today we're just going to read 22 because it's pretty long. And then we'll just go into 23 tomorrow since it's kind of cuts off at a pretty good section. And I'll just begin, I guess. Alright. So again, a lot of these laws, these are the laws that were, set for them when they were living out there. And that's what the Jewish people had to follow. So some of them are still things that, again, like if you look at the intention of the law or why it was set in place, then it could still relate to today. Specifically, whether or not it's something that so I don't know if you've ever heard about they say we don't live under the law anymore once Jesus came, that there's a new law. There's a bunch of conversations about that, and there's some people who are like, no, we still got to do every single thing on the list. And then people on the other end, they're like, no, we don't have to do any of it. And I think there's that, I guess it makes it kind of hard to understand, so am I supposed to be caring about this, or should I not care about this? And I think this is why it's important to read the entirety of the Bible, because I think then it gives us a better understanding of which of these little things are so incredibly necessary, and which ones are more of the intention of why God put them into place. Because some of them don't relate anymore. Some of them are worded in ways that wouldn't relate to us individually, but the intention of it still matters. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind, because I think we're gonna go into some, I don't know, I got a lot of so the way I drew it on my Bible, I don't know if you guys can see that, is green means do, orange means don't. So it looks like we have a lot of don'ts on here. Alright. 22. When a man steals an ox or a sheep and butchers it or sells it, he must repay 5 cattle for the ox or 4 sheep for the sheep. Okay, if you don't have cattle, then none of this really sounds like it relates to you. Then again, if you have anything though and somebody would steal from you, the whole concept of getting retribution for that or justice, that still kind of makes sense in today's world, right? Maybe not the specifics, but the intention. Okay. Okay. Now the next part, we don't do this anymore. If a thief is caught in the act of breaking in and he is beaten to death, no one is guilty of bloodshed. But if this happens after sunrise, there is guilt of bloodshed. A thief must make full restitution. If he is unable, he is to be sold because of his theft. If what's stolen, whether ox, donkey, or sheep, is actually found alive in his possession, he must repay double. I don't know why that is. If it's found alive, I feel like that feels okay. Both the thing about sunrise and the thing about if he's found alive must mean something bigger, because why would that be set up as specifics? That's probably something interesting to look up. I'm sure there's a specific reason for that. Sometimes when you don't understand something, it's easy to just think, okay, that seems so it should mean something, so maybe it does. That's something to look up, or it's something to keep in mind in case somebody ever made it an argument of hey, you're supposed to be guilty of bloodshed after you're supposed to be killed or blah blah blah. Then you can look in here and be wait a minute, let's look at the context and try to understand maybe why this was set in place the way it was. Laws about crop protection. When a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed in and then allows his animals to go and graze in someone else's field, he must repay with the best of his own field or vineyard. When a fire gets out of control, spreads to thorn bushes, and consumes stacks of cut grain, standing grain, or a field, the one who started the fire must make full restitution for what was burned. So a lot of those seem to make sense, I guess, in the sense that if you kind of, you're repaying for what you're taking or for what you caused to happen. I think that makes sense. I don't think I know enough about either of those things to talk about them, though. Okay, loss about personal property. When a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep, but they are stolen from that person's house, the thief, if caught, must repay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house must present himself to the judges to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbor's property. Sorry, that I got confused there. In any case of wrongdoing involving an ox or donkey or sheep, a garment, or anything else lost in someone's claim, that's mine, the case between the two parties is to come before the judges. The one the judges condemn must repay double to his neighbor. Remember earlier they talked about how Moses set up judges so people to basically be like, hey, somebody to help him do all these things. These are the kind of things, I guess, that must have been coming up, and so now there's specific rules set in place for why they should be done that way. I guess it sounds like court for us. We have judges. I guess that's not that weird, except we have specific very different laws, I guess. Another thing to keep in mind is that today, at least in the U.S., we have a say in the laws, right? Like, we get to say this law doesn't seem just, so we are going to go petition for it to be changed, and then you can get support for it, and there's a procedure for it. Obviously, it's not easy, but part of what makes up our rules and our laws, like the actual legal laws in our country, is that we actually have a say in them. And I think a lot of times people don't think that that's a thing, or they think that just because things are the way they are, that's what's right, or that's what should be, instead of realizing that part of following the laws of this country and part of being a part of this country is to actively engage in this country, and it's a freedom that a lot of other places don't have. Just keep that in mind, because there's other parts in the Bible where it talks about how we should follow our government's rulings, and we should follow the law of the land and those kind of things, and recognizing that the U.S. has a very different system set up than other places. We have a freedom that other people don't have, that we should be trying to partake in, rather than, kind of giving it for granted. I don't know. Does that make sense? Okay. Especially with things like this, because these little laws must have meant so much to them in that moment, because at least it gave them a standard for how to do things, versus Moses trying to figure it all out, and then being God's the one setting these practices in place so that way things are done correctly, or at least within some sort of justice. Okay, when a man gives his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any other animal to care for, but it dies, isn't injured, or is stolen while no one is watching, there must be an oath before the Lord between the two of them to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbor's property. Its owner must accept the oath, and the other man does not have to make restitution, but if in fact the animal was stolen from his custody, he must make restitution to its owner. If it was actually torn apart by a wild animal, he is to bring it as evidence. He does not have to make restitution for the torn carcass. When a man borrows an animal from his neighbor and it's injured or dies while its owner is not there with it, the man must make full restitution. If its owner is there with it, the man does not have to make restitution. If it was rented, the loss is covered by its rental price. Okay, loss about seduction. So weird how to go from one to the other. That tells you a lot about how much we value property and other things. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and he has sexual relations with her, he must certainly pay the bridal price for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must pay an amount in silver equal to the bridal price for virgins. So basically, I don't know how to go into that one. Is that saying, basically, you do it with someone, right? You're basically taking her as a wife, I guess. So you couldn't just go around with everyone. Alright, capital offenses. You must not allow a sorceress to live. Whoever has sexual intercourse with an animal must be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any gods except the Lord alone is to be set apart for destruction. So all of those were considered incredibly capital offenses. So that means they were incredibly bad. So I guess we definitely don't live in that kind of world where we don't, I don't know how to say it. I guess definitely have a lot more freedom when it comes to these kind of things. Not that people, or many people, wouldn't agree that some of these things are bad. Do you know what I mean? But we live in a very different world. So, laws protecting the vulnerable. You must not exploit a foreign resident or oppress him, since you are foreigners in the land of Egypt. You must not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you mistreat them, they will no doubt cry to me, and I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will burn, and I will kill you with a sword. Then your wives will be widows, and your children fatherless. I like how it kind of relates it back to like your own personal. So it says like, hey, don't hurt people, because remember, you were a hurt person. So like it kind of brings in that empathy. So at least allow them to understand why it matters that you shouldn't do that. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as collateral, return it to him before sunset, for it is his only covering. It is the clothing for his body. What will he sleep in? And if he cries out to me, I will listen, because I am compassionate. So I wrote a note on here because later on it's going to talk about how laws about lending money and how you're not supposed to lend with interest, which I wish that's the way it was done today. But I was wondering if that relates to that, because it's kind of like collateral is kind of like a thing of, right, like you're not trusting that person's going to give you back what you gave them, so you take something just in case, or is interest where you are taking something and making a profit from having given somebody. And in today's world, I guess we see that as very fair, because we tend not to be trusting of people. We tend not to care too much we just generally don't trust that people will do the right thing. And here I would say that I'm sure the intention is to care for the person that you're helping. It's kind of like that whole saying, neither a lender nor a borrower be, because it just creates issues. So you can't trust the person, just either give them the money or don't give them anything. Okay. And then respect for God, 28. You must not blaspheme God or curse a leader among your people. You must not hold back offerings from your harvest or your vats. Give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your flock. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but on the 8th day you are to give them to me. So, giving your firstborn of your son and giving your firstborn of your cattle did not mean the same thing. It meant offering, but you didn't, animals were sacrificed. People weren't. Be my holy people. You must not eat the meat of a mauled animal found in the field. Throw it to the dogs. So, alright, 2 things I want to bring up. 1, a lot of people judge the Bible and a lot of these rules because obviously they seem like very especially when you go into the food ones or you go into cleanliness things and you're like, that all seems so, I guess, look, when you look at things that's ritualistic, it can seem really freaky because you're like, why did they have to do all these things in a certain way? When you then now that we live in today's world, right, like today, like we're supposed to be washing our hands for a specific amount of times, we're supposed to do this when we go buy stuff and do this when we go do this and blah blah blah, and there's all these rules and we don't see them as rituals, we see them as this is the way to live in order to be able to be healthy and safe and secure and etc., right, because we understand germs. Back then they didn't know about germs, but yet they were given all these rules that made a lot of sense so that they would be healthy and safe and clean and it's weird to think, oh, you have to wash yourself before you can worship God. But it's different if you look at it from the perspective of, like, He gave you the knowledge that washing yourself was a good thing before coming to God. Like, do you know what I mean? So, versus, like, a lot of other cultures throughout history, not that long ago, where ritual washing or just washing in general was not a thing. Like, we went to this, just a few months, like a little bit before all this craziness happened, we went down to a it's like an old house back from, not even that old. It was like late 1800s to early 1900s. And she showed us, it's like a museum, you know, and they keep everything old. And then there was this brush looking thing in the middle of the room. And they're like, oh yeah, that was the toothbrush. The toothbrush. I said, one toothbrush for everybody who ever came there. And it was like a hotel, so people were coming in and out, you know. It wasn't like one person's house with only 4 people. It was like every person used that same thing in their mouth. They didn't know better. Like, it was just, throughout a lot of history, we didn't know that cleanliness was a positive thing. So remember, a lot of these laws were about setting these people apart, setting them so that people noticed that they were different, because of their God, right? Imagine how different these people are if they're clean and they don't smell like horrible, and they're healthy, and they practice things where they like set people apart for a certain amount of time if they're not clean. Like, you know, I guess we tend to think of like that people may have seen it as like ritualistic and that all of it's so spiritual, and we see it in those terms, but maybe in the actuality of it, it was just, they probably lived better, you know? And we can see those things as confining and like, oh my God, why do we have to do all these things? Or we could see them as like, maybe these were blessings that God gave them. Do you know what I mean? Now the other part, so even see, be my holy people, be my set apart people, right? So again, with some of these things, for example, when it says, do not hold back offerings sometimes meant different things. So sometimes they meant like, hey, go kill that animal. Sometimes they meant like dedicate them, right? And then sometimes like we're going to learn about offerings in the sense of like kind of like what tithing is. But they didn't tithe money the same way that we would do here. They gave like grain and the stuff that they grew. So, and again, it's one of those things where understanding the words makes a big difference. And obviously some of these are kind of hard to read, because in today's world, if somebody says they're a witch, right, they're not going to be murdered. And they shouldn't be. I don't believe they should. And if you're taking the information in here, and some people may just take that and say, we're going to run with that, and that's how things should be, then do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes people will take just one section and say, see, that's a rule, and that's how we should do things, and that's what we should do to people. And I don't think that's right either, you know? At least not the way the world works today, or even the way God works today. So that's one of those things where, like I said, we don't live under the law anymore. Yeah, maybe we don't stone people anymore. Then again, if you take it from the end of, but the intention was that people shouldn't be doing sorcery, so that you don't become a person who would fall under this. So then that also means don't do sorcery. Does that make sense? Okay. And yeah, there's just a lot of little rules. We're gonna go through this all week. These parts are kind of hard to read, just because, I don't know, they're kind of, it's all rules and stuff. So, because tomorrow we're gonna read more rules. Well, no, this part's worse. That sounds horrible to say. It's just some parts are kind of difficult to read. I would say they're kind of boring, which is why people don't read them. So maybe we can come up with something interesting, some way to make them a little more interesting. Because this rules, and then it goes into how to build like the tabernacle, and that's gonna be hard to read. I'm gonna try to read through it fast, and then more rules. So yeah, as you can see, I didn't make that many notes on those sections just because they're not that interesting. But doesn't mean that they're not important, and that they weren't important for a reason, because then a lot of the stuff that gets mentioned here gets mentioned again later on, like when they rebuild when they build the temple the first time, right? Or when they rebuild it, they talk about all these things. And there are people, obviously theologists or people who study stuff, who have taken the time to take the details into consideration. So when you hear all these people who talk about like Noah's Ark, right? I always see, like, I've watched, there's entire documentaries out there of like, was it a realistic boat? Could this boat be built today? And those people had to actually pay attention to those details. They're like, it's this many cubits by this. You know, you and I, if we're not scientists, if we're not people who are in that kind of world, we may not have to take those specific numbers into consideration. But it's good to know where they are in case somebody's trying to convince you of something. You're able to then go look and see, wait a minute, this guy's wrong because they're not even saying that. Like, they're using something else, or they're making an argument with information that's incorrect, etc. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys are having a good Monday. I hope you're all safe and healthy and that you're making good decisions. My state's kind of opening back up right now, so I'm thinking that we're going to start seeing people on the street a lot more. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you listen to. We're probably going to... I stay home most of the time anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But I'm hoping that everybody stays safe and healthy, and that if your states start opening back up, that you're also just following the rules so that you don't get in trouble, but also so that you stay safe and healthy and just make smart decisions, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. If you guys need any resources, if you need any kind of support, you're looking for any kind of help like that, just send me a message and I'll send you out some links. And yeah, I hope you guys are doing great and have a good day and peace out. I have a little clicker that I'm going to try to use to turn this off. So if it turns off, it works. If not, you'll see me stand up. Bye. Nope, didn't work.